After 5 years of marriage, Shen and I cannot be said to be in love, but we treat each other with respect. He doesn't care that I have someone else in my heart, and I don't care that he has countless beauties. Until a woman stopped my carriage in the street and wanted to have a frank meeting with me. I sat in the sedan chair, holding the warm stove, without even raising my eyelids. You have to kneel down. Pick a place with thick snow.
1.
When Cheng Wushuang stopped the sedan chair in the street and wanted to be frank with me, I didn't even raise my eyelids. I want to see the princess, but I don't even have the basic etiquette. You have to kneel down and pick the areas with thick snow. Cheng Wushuang was pressed into the snow, and the heavy snow fell on her face, making her look miserable. After one stick of incense, "Ma'am," she fainted. I nodded and opened my eyes. Drag it to the side of the road, and don't block my way. The thick felt was airtight, and the strong wind and heavy snow were kept out, but it did make me sweat profusely. They work too hard, and are no better than the young people. They don't want to endure any wind and rain. After returning home and drinking a cup of tea, my aunt whispered in my ear, "The person has been taken away. The Marquis carried him personally." The Marquis that Aunt Yao mentioned is my husband, Shen. He has always loved cleanliness and was unwilling to touch paper soaked in ink, but he was willing to hold Cheng Wushuang, who was covered in mud, in his arms. It can be seen that he really likes this delicate flower. I waved my hand nonchalantly, called my son Shen over, and smiled as I asked him about his homework for the day. It was not until Shen opened the curtain and walked in that a gust of wind and snow hit our faces. He suppressed his anger and looked at me coldly. "Shuang is just a poor person with no one to rely on. Why do you have to humiliate her in public? Now that you're frozen, how are you going to compensate her?" I winked at Aunt Yao, and she took the worried Shen out of the yard completely. I replied coldly, "If she doesn't come to me, how can I humiliate her? You spent my money, slept with my husband, and even dared to show off in front of me. You are such a pitiful person. Do you want to die?" Shen brows instantly twisted into knots. "Everyone in the capital praises you, Xianing, for your intelligence and ability, and for being the most beautiful woman in the world. No one knows that you have a vicious heart beneath your pretty face. They misjudged you, and so did I." After saying that, he turned and walked away. The tall figure was obscured by the wind and snow. Amid the howling of the wind, I remembered that it was him who asked to marry me at the cost of ruining his reputation. Shen is the eldest grandson of the Marquis of Qing'an, and he inherited the title directly, bypassing his father Shen, who is uneducated. I am also the only daughter of the Duke of Hugua, and I was named a princess early on. They are well matched and have been childhood sweethearts, so the marriage should have been a smooth journey and a beautiful story. But he has his white moonlight, and I also have my cinnabar mole, so we should have become strangers from then on. Only his white moonlight entered the palace and illuminated the future of my mother's family, while my cinnabar mole entered the battlefield and dyed my battle clothes red. He was down and out, and I was destitute, and we became a pair of frustrated people that everyone in Beijing pitied. Later, at my birthday party, he solemnly asked me to marry him. After I rejected him, he held me in his arms in front of all the concubines and whispered in my cheek, "It's always a compromise. It's better for you to come to me than to find someone else." I think so too. Others may not be able to tolerate that I have someone else in my heart, but it just so happens that he does too. But now that we have physical contact, I can't refuse. They have been married for 5 years, and their son is 4 years old. They give each other enough respect in front of others, so their life is considered perfect. I know he has countless girls outside, but I don't care. If possible, I would also like to find another cinnabar mole among thousands of people, even if it is a substitute. Aunt Tao was afraid that people from outside would crowd into the house and make me uncomfortable, so she shouted that she wanted to go and discipline the people outside. I shook my head and refused. My great-aunt the Empress Dowager warned Shen that the women in the Duke of Hugua's mansion had suffered enough as concubines, and she and my aunt the Empress would not allow me to suffer that kind of hardship again. Shen patted his chest and promised that he would never add anyone else to the backyard. I don't care how ridiculous he is, as long as he doesn't provoke me. Everything is fine. He thought that his life would be uneventful, but in late autumn last year, he rescued the prostitute Cheng Wushuang who was being molested. After that night, he bought her a house in the suburbs of Beijing and hired servants to serve her personally. And he came back later and later, like a man who was having a mistress. Aunt Tao advised me, "My lord, it's just a temporary novelty. Once the excitement wears off, it will fade away. None of those confidants can last for 3 months." I shook my head and said nothing. She is different. She will live in his heart. 2. The end of the year is approaching, and the mansion and the courtyard are extremely busy. Shen has a close relationship with his mistress, and he is busy preparing New Year's goods for their small family and rarely returns home. People outside praised him for his romantic and passionate character and laughed at me, a princess, for becoming a coward. Aunt Yao was very angry and kept on talking. She was so angry that she wanted to go back to the Duke of Hugua's mansion to ask for help. She wanted to shoot the 2 shameless and ungrateful people to death with an arrow through their hearts. I had no choice but to close the account book and take her around the shop to vent her anger. Cheng Wushuang would go to the shop every 5 days to collect a lot of jewelry, and today was the 5th day. She can take me, but she can't touch my money. She had no idea how powerful I was, and she was still holding the tray full of expensive jewelry, with a look of pride and provocation on her face. It's still not good enough, and the workmanship isn't fine enough. It doesn't match my dress, but I'll just accept it. Next time, if you find something really good, remember to leave it for me. People coming and going were waiting to laugh at me. It's really funny that the concubine overshadows the principal wife. I raised my eyebrows and spoke to the embarrassed shopkeeper. "Pack up everything Miss Cheng likes." Her face became more and more proud. I probably thought that the last time I made things difficult for her and she fainted in the snow, and Shen didn't return home for several days, was a profound lesson for me. I roughly calculated the price of today's batch of jewelry, plus the jewelry I got 7 times before, and it's about 5,700 taels. Thank you for your frequent business, so I'll give you 5,500 taels. It's a tough year, and it's time to pay the bills. Do you understand, young lady? Cheng Wushuang widened her watery eyes and cried out in disbelief. "My lord has told me to take whatever I want. Why are you asking me for money?" I smiled. "Because it's my dowry. Not only that, the clothes you wear, the silver charcoal you use, and the food you eat are all from my dowry shop." With the account books spread out in front of everyone, she was speechless. In just over a month, she spent nearly 10,000 taels of silver. Facing Aunt Yao and the crowd waiting for her to pay, she couldn't pay, her face flushed, and she glared at me fiercely. "I didn't bring that much cash today. Come to my house tomorrow to get it." Finding an excuse, she fled and became a laughingstock in front of everyone. Even Shen, who used his wife's family shop to show off to his mistress, was ridiculed. If you can't afford to support a concubine, then don't do it. It doesn't make sense to ask the wife to support a concubine. The princess's money didn't just fall from the sky. The damage to my reputation is just a small matter, but no one can afford to lose out on my hard-earned money. After waiting for 3 days, Cheng Wushuang still refused to show up, and even the shopkeepers who went to ask for a meeting were turned away. She thought I couldn't do anything to her, but I turned around and filed a lawsuit and sent her to court. Kneeling in the hall, she looked weak and panic-stricken and was forced to sign a document, promising to pay the full amount within 10 days. She hated me to death, but she never thought that if she choked to death while eating free food, she could only blame herself for having a big appetite. Although Aunt Yao was happy, she was also worried and asked me whether such an action would hurt the Marquis's reputation. It's his reputation that's hurt, but it's my money that's recovered. Killing 2 birds with 1 stone. How can we not count the accounts? 3. Shen, who was assigned to work outside, returned home exhausted in just 3 days. With a face that looked like it was exposed to the elements, he was furious. "Xianing, are you really so heartless?" The dignity on his body is becoming thinner and thinner, as thin as our friendship, which will be broken if it is poked. When you even missed Ear's birthday for her, there was no relationship between us. Besides, I've already suffered a loss in love. How can you still scheme against me financially? Okay. I can't argue with you. Just keep your money from now on. After saying that, he went straight into the study to look for his valuables. Unfortunately, after searching through the books, I found that few of them were purchased by him. I watched him busy collecting things with a cold eye. Thinking of Aunt Yao's determination to move all the things I bought to the warehouse yesterday, I couldn't help but sneer. These are just my son's things. They are not worth much. My lord, you are so kind to me, but you are reluctant to open a private vault. He paused, turned around and glared at me, then turned around and walked out the door with a thick package. You forced me to do this. She is not like you. She has her family to support her. I can only do my best to treat her well. He took the banknotes and the house deed box, left the house without looking back, and went to relieve his beloved's worries. When the mother-in-law saw him taking the money, she felt jealous. I've finally come to my senses and know how to please you. I shook my head. I did get it, but the things he bought were for his sweetheart. I don't have that kind of luck. Ignoring the chaos in my mother-in-law's yard, I called the shopkeeper that night. Take out those priceless things. If you want to get rich, use some tricks. Therefore, within a few days, the shops on my street suddenly increased their revenue by tens of thousands of taels. The courtyard on West Street that had long been wanted to be sold was also occupied by Cheng Wushuang, who was known as Mrs. Shen. Mrs. Xiao Shen couldn't stand being flattered and called Madam, and under the flattery of the shopkeeper, she lived in extreme luxury compared to me in terms of food, clothing, and other expenses. Not only that, she also used 3 pots of tears to keep Shen Rujua in the yard. Shen Rujua even told me, if he doesn't apologize to Shuang'er, he will continue to live here. I ignored him, and he never returned to the Shen family. Mrs. Xiao Shen repeatedly provoked and boasted to me, both openly and covertly, in an attempt to lure me into a trap and cause me to be despised. But she waited and waited, but I, a bitch, never came to her door. She could only deliberately meet me in the tea house where I often appeared and show off to me. She was wearing shoe brocade that was worth a fortune and pink pearls and red jadeite that were only worn by imperial concubines. Even the 4 maids accompanying her were neatly lined up behind her. With such a great style, she truly deserves the title of Mrs. Shen. Seeing me looking at her luxury, Cheng Wushuang deliberately raised her wrist, revealing the Shen family's heirloom bracelet, and smiled ostentatiously and artificially. What if you are a princess? If you don't know how to win a man's heart, you will end up being a divorced woman sooner or later. Knowing that you look down on me, the person who might make the marquis open up to me is me. Your title of marquis's wife and the future of the Shen family, he said, will all be mine. I watched her performance leisurely, and even though I felt nauseous when her bracelet shook me, I didn't get angry. Only after she had finished showing off all her wealth and favor did I gently move aside, revealing my demon-like mother-in-law behind me.
Bitch.
My mother-in-law is not as generous as me. Spending Shen Rujua's money would be like costing her life. She snatched the bracelet away in anger and slapped Cheng Wushuang twice in the face. You've had enough of stealing my Shen family's heirlooms and money. Come here, tie her up and send her to the Ministry of Justice. If she doesn't give up everything that belongs to my Shen family, I'll skin her alive. Cheng Wushuang covered his beaten face, full of surprise. Madam, no, it's the Marquis.
Bah.
You filthy bastard. You made the Marquis happy for 2 days, and now you think you're a dish. If you can't afford a mirror, you should look in the gutter. What a piece of shit. The maids in Xingchenla are prettier than you. The devastated Cheng Wushuang was holding his chest and trembling, but Shen Rujua suddenly came and hugged him. Xianing, why do you always cause trouble for her? Haven't I given in enough? You are always like this, pretending to be indifferent, but actually caring about everything. It's disgusting. I spread my hands helplessly and pointed at his mother. Parents are the most compassionate people in the world. Your mother is worried about you as a person, and she is also worried about your money. His face darkened. He glared at me, then bowed to his mother. Since mother has seen it, I won't hide it from you. I like Schwanger very much. I hope you can give her a name. She is so kind and I am filial. My mother will definitely not refuse. The mother-in-law endured the pain and slapped Shenrujua in the face again. You have no shame, but the Marquis mansion still wants it. Don't let this filthy thing that has been in a brothel bring disgrace upon our Shen family. Cheng Wuxiang had her fig leaf torn off in public. She grabbed Shenrujua's clothes and cried silently, just like a white lotus blooming in the spring breeze. Not everyone is like Xianing, born in a family of power, where they can get whatever they want. Mother knew that Shuanghe was helpless, so couldn't she give this poor girl a chance to hold her head up high and live her life as a human being? I am willing to give her a way out as a slave, but if she wants to be my wife, forget it. Cheng Wuxiang bit her lip and stopped Shenrujua. Don't say that again. Shuanghe has no face to live. Shenrujua couldn't bear to see Cheng Wuxiang being wronged, so he dragged him away and said something cruel. If you can't tolerate her, I won't go back to the Shen family. 4. My mother-in-law was so angry that her hands were shaking, but she did not forget to hold my hand to comfort me. Don't be afraid, Ning. Mother will protect you, and will never let her in. I asked him to take the bracelet to cheer you up, but I didn't expect. Mother wouldn't let him do that. I smiled without saying anything, only glanced at the priceless imperial jadeite on her body, and calmly withdrew my hand. After all, the bond between mother and son is deep, and they cannot be separated because of an outsider like me. Her eyes flashed, and she quickly covered her wrist with her sleeve. Nonsense. Aining is my sweetheart, and I will never let her down. As if to prove it to me, the next day, my mother-in-law ordered the housekeeper to bring a large group of people to empty out the belongings in Mrs. Shen's yard. Cheng Wuxiang, wearing a moon-white jacket and a fiery red fox fur coat, stood under a dead tree in winter with his neck stiffened, like a blooming snow-proud plum. Let's see who dares. You are breaking into a private house. I can sue you. The butler replied with a fake smile. These are all my master's assets. How they are handled is not for outsiders to comment on. I bought it with a banknote, so it should be my property. You are not even a free man. How can you afford to buy property? The old lady said that it would be disgraceful to touch the government, so you should take care of yourself. Cheng Wuxiang was afraid of Madame Shen's aggressiveness and vulgarity, so he didn't dare to respond rashly. The butler became even more presumptuous, cupping his hands and sneering. Your fox fur is my wife's dowry. Please return it to its original owner. It was a pity that the fox fur was stripped off by the nanny before I even got warm to it. Burn it. It smells like a vixen and makes Madame feel sick. Cheng Wuxiang, feeling humiliated, changed into a white cloak and stood in the wind shivering. However, Shenrujua was stopped in the mansion by Aunt Yao, and no one responded to her sad story. I was sitting on the opposite building watching the show, but was seen by Cheng Wuxiang. She rushed over with gritted teeth, staring at me with red eyes. Are you trying to humiliate me by doing this, and drive me away? Okay, I'll go and show you how to explain to the Marquis. Oh, as long as you don't die, I will have an explanation. She gave me a cold look, and that day she left Beijing with a small package, rubbing her eyes. Shenrujua, who was invited by her personal maid, stopped her on the street. Where are you going? Without me, what can a weak woman like you do? I knew you would be wronged. No matter how hard I tried, I was still late. Cheng Wuxiang wiped her tears, and I felt pity for her. Shuanghe is redundant and shouldn't be in the prosperous Xinjiang. Let Shuanghe go back to where she came from. After all, I am a humble person, and I can still make a living even if I beg on the street. The Marquis is being bullied by everyone because of Shuanghe, and Shuanghe is really heartbroken. Shuanghe is gone. My lord, you must take care of yourself and live a good life with your madam after you return home. Don't worry about Shuanghe anymore, and don't make your madam angry again. After saying that, Cheng Wuxiang turned around resolutely, wiped away his tears, and left a lonely and helpless back to Shenrujua. Shenrujua's eyes finally turned red, and he pulled the person into his arms. If you leave, my heart will leave with you. What's the point of keeping a walking corpse in the Shen family? Don't leave, stay for me, okay? The two of them began to cry and hug each other, acting out the sadness of separation and death. Not satisfied with being disgusting, Cheng Wushuang even raised his eyes and smiled at me provocatively. But when the young ladies from the powerful families behind me clapped and cheered for her, she was so shocked that she almost fainted on the spot. I'll treat you to tea today. Next time there's a good free show like this, please let us watch it. Shen Rouge's cold eyes fell fiercely on me. I clapped my hands and praised. My lord is indeed a man who has supported actors before. He performed well. He was humiliated and furious, but he didn't dare to confront me in public. Cheng Wushuang acted like a lowly actor in front of others and was laughed at so much that he fell ill. Shen Rouge stayed by his side and took care of him for 7 days. On the 8th day, he knelt in front of Shen's father and mother. Shuang'er is pregnant. I must give her a legitimate status. Children of the Shen family must always recognize their ancestors and return to their roots.
5.
My mother-in-law, who had stood firmly on my side a few days ago, became less confident after hearing that Cheng Wushuang was pregnant, and she looked at me hesitantly. It is normal for a man to have 3 wives and 4 concubines, not to mention how can the flesh and blood of my Shen family be left alone outside. I have to call you mother anyway, so what does that bitch mean to me? Aining. Being too stubborn is bad for the reputation of the Duke of the Guardian's mansion. When Shen Rouge asked to marry me, my parents were worried that he had someone else in his heart and were afraid that I would be wronged. Mother Shen almost slapped her chest to pieces and swore to treat me better than her own daughter. But within 5 years, she had forgotten her promise and had already begun to think about taking a concubine for Shen Rouge. Shuang'er is simple, not as worried as you. Just give her a proper status and a small courtyard, and she will live peacefully with her child. She won't pose any threat to you. It's not good for you to be known as a jealous woman. You and I are husband and wife. There's no need to make things so awkward because of an outsider. I looked up at Mr. Shen. He was still holding the birdcage, chirping the little oriole, and ignored his current anxiety. The oriole lived in a cage with a bottom of golden nanmu wood, ate venison paste, and drank mountain spring water. It was more precious than humans. The Shen family has been living too comfortably relying on the nobility of my Xie family and has completely forgotten all the hardships they experienced in the past. But I was not born to be a housekeeper. I smiled coldly at this family. Okay, just let her in. You make your own choice, as long as you don't regret it. I got up and left, taking Shen Yi with me. He hid behind a vermilion pillar, watching eagerly how the Shen family made things difficult for his mother and how they valued the child who had not yet appeared and might not even be born. Don't be afraid, Ear. Mother, Ear will always be my favorite and will never be replaced by anyone else. 6. While the Shen family was happily busy preparing and decorating the yard for the new couple, I hired 5 shopkeepers to calculate the revenue of the past 5 years and the money accumulated in the public accounts. Aunt Yao saw that I was serious and tried to persuade me. I am just a concubine, nothing to be afraid of. I have served the Queen Mother for many years, and I know 1,000 ways to make her die quietly. Madam, why bother? Looking at Shen Yi, who was teasing ants with his head down, my heart ached. I know that he went to find Shen Rouge early in the morning with a homework that was praised by the teacher, but Shen Rouge was busy making a garden for Cheng Wushuang and her unborn child. He threw the rice paper aside with his muddy hands and sent Shen Yi away. Shen Yi left with a heart full of joy, but returned with tears of disappointment. But he was afraid that I would be sad, so he endured the grievance and didn't say a word. I can make do, because I need to wait. That's not the case with Ear. He shouldn't always be disappointed in his life. I regarded Ear as so important that I would not allow him to go anywhere else except my yard, but trouble still found him. Cheng Wushuang came to my yard under the pretext of saying hello to me. At that time, I was checking accounts in the shop. She then set her sights on Ear. She spilled a pot of hot tea on Ear, and she fell to the ground screaming, wailing in abdominal pain and slandering Ear for hurting her. When I rushed home after hearing the news, I saw Aunt Yao trying hard to hold back her tears. Shen Rujua and his mother, along with the court doctor, gathered in Cheng Wushuang's yard. Shen Rujua even threatened that if the baby in my aunt's belly showed any abnormality, everyone in my yard would be killed. Young master? They ignored my living Shen Yi and treated the piece of meat that didn't come out as their heart and liver. They said he was in shock and they are currently examining him. My lord, can't take care of our yard. Looking at the bright blisters on Ear's feet, I could no longer suppress the anger in my heart. Go back home. 7. At the end of the year, the streets were crowded with people, but I was sitting in the coachman's seat, waving the whip and driving the carriage as fast as possible. Along the way, it caused countless exclamations. When I arrived at the Duke's mansion, I shouted loudly, showing my hurt. Father, help me. Hurry up and call the doctor. There were many onlookers outside the door. When they saw me rushing back to the mansion in a hurry and calling the imperial physician, they guessed most of what happened. After a flurry of consultation and prescribing medicine, the imperial physician was stopped outside the mansion. When questioned, he found out that Ear had a concubine who was scalded but did not receive treatment at the Shen family. For a time, it caused a sensation in the whole capital. Everyone knows that when Ear was born, my father and the Shen family had a quarrel in the Palace of Tranquil Longevity over whether he would inherit the title of Marquis or take over my father's position as Duke of Protector of the country. In the end, it was His Majesty who tried to smooth things over, saying that Ear could make her own choice when she grew up, and only then did both sides give up. At that time, who didn't envy Shen Yi? But now, who doesn't sympathize with Shen Yi? The Duke of Hugua's eyes were plotted against by the Shen family's concubines and despised by the Shen family. Princess Chaoyang was forced to drive the carriage back to the Duke's mansion to ask for help, which saved her good skin. After stabilizing Shen Yi, I told my father and mother about the situation in the Shen mansion, as well as my plans and concerns. I thought they would sigh and persuade me to be patient, but I didn't expect my father to pick up a gun and go to the Shen mansion to fight for a divorce for me, and even destroy half of Shen Rujua's life. Father, calm down. Physical injuries will heal if they are treated properly. If they have hurt me, I will make them pay with blood. Seeing that I had a plan, my father paused for a long time before sighing. Don't be wronged. If you can't make it, just come back. The spear of the Duke's mansion will always stand behind you and your son. If only, The cold moonlight fell on my father's face, illuminating his regret and my heartache. I had been back home for half a day when Shen Rujua sent the butler to pick me up. The Marquis said that since the young master is young and inexperienced, a light punishment will be enough. Madam, you are not strict in discipline. You should hand over the power of housekeeper, copy the female rules, and reflect on your mistakes. I threw a bowl of hot tea at his face and shouted in anger. Roll. The housekeeper left in disgrace, and no one from the Shen family ever came to ask about Shen Yi's injury again. Even a tiger won't eat its own cubs. How could the Shen family be so heartless? I hugged my mother. The Shen family's ruthlessness made me so ruthless. On the second day, Shen Rujua was impeached by the censors in the court for favoring his concubine and killing his wife, and harming his legitimate son. My elderly father even knelt before the holy throne and asked for a divorce. His Majesty loves me, but he doesn't dare to set a precedent of granting a divorce, so he wants to punish the vicious Cheng Wushuang to appease my anger. It was then that Shen Rujua learned from the imperial physician's statement what kind of state Shen Yi had been burned in. But he knelt before the emperor to plead for Cheng Wushuang, and he also took the 10 strokes of the cane that she was punished with. His father was disappointed in him. I was wrong. I shouldn't have sent Aining to the Shen family. He suddenly looked up and saw murderous intent in his father's face, so he stopped talking. But the accusation that he favored his concubine and neglected his wife was finally fulfilled. 8. Shen Yi's legs and feet were injured, and he lay in bed all day listening to me tell stories, but his big eyes were always looking out the door. My heart moved. I put down the book and asked seriously, "You miss him a lot?" He lowered his eyes timidly. I said I miss my father. Will my mother be sad? My nose felt sore, and I held his little head in my arms. Won't. My child, he is free. He can think of anyone or not think of anyone. He is free to love and to hate. Then, can he come to see me? My tightly clenched hands turned pale. Silly child, it's not that your mother doesn't want to let him see it. It's that he never wanted to come. If he had you in his heart, your mother wouldn't have ended up in such a situation. That evening, Shen's mother came with a lot of gifts to restore her son's reputation. After saying a lot of apologies, my parents were always indifferent. You can go and take a look and take the gifts back with you. It breaks my heart to see my grandson's flesh and blood. Mother Shen's face froze, but she didn't dare to refute. Seeing Shun Yi's legs and feet covered with medicine, she covered her hands with a handkerchief and trembled. He's injured so badly. Didn't she say she wasn't hurt? She couldn't continue. Even someone as slow-witted as her could easily see through Chen Wushuang's intentions, let alone the shrewd Chen Rujua. Aining mother? Mother, there is no need to say more. After all, the Marquis was born from your womb, so it is natural for you to favor him. But is also my own flesh and blood. I love him, mother. I think you can understand. Her words for peace were blocked. After Shen's mother left, Shen Yi cautiously spoke. Mom, I forgot to bring my paper. The Duke's mansion has it. Where's my husband? You can do it again. You want to go back? He looked at me guiltily, then nodded with red eyes. My heart softened, and I couldn't help blaming myself for being too impatient. Although the opportunity cannot be missed, is still a child after all, and the Marquis mansion is his home where he has grown up for 4 years. He was not used to or adapted to suddenly leaving the mansion and parting with the people closest to him. My parents knew that I was in a dilemma. They loved their daughter, but also felt sorry for their grandson. Whatever you choose, your father and mother will support you unconditionally. I am so lucky that I always have my parents to support me. If it is intentional too, it would be so perfect.
9.
A few days later, Aunt Yao came to me in panic. That vile creature knelt in front of the Duke's mansion in plain clothes, making a lot of noise. The Duke and his wife were so angry that they almost fainted. I followed him to the door calmly, only to find that Chen Wushuang had poured a large basin of dirty water on me. She was holding her unnoticeable belly, and with the help of her maid, she burst into tears. Sister, this is all my fault. You can punish me or beat me as you like. I just ask you not to embarrass the Marquis. They are his relatives around him. Even if he has to endure the injustice and be punished, he can't bear to see his children suffer even the slightest criticism. Since my sister doesn't like me, I will leave tomorrow. Please calm down and go back to the mansion. With just a few words, she overturned the fact that she had harmed Shen Yi and caused Shen Rujua to be punished. Not only did he brand me as jealous, he also secretly pointed out that Shen Yi was instigated by me, and that was why he failed to harm her and ended up hurting himself. And the beating Shen Rujua received was to cover up the shame for my mother and me. She felt so wronged, getting hurt and being scolded. She was so kind that she even came to beg me to come back home despite being pregnant. No wonder Mom and Dad are so angry. There are few people in the world who are so shameless and confuse right and wrong. I pushed the door open, looked at Chen Wushuang, who was crying nonstop, and beat the gongs and drums and shouted loudly. Please bear witness for me. She is now kneeling in front of our mansion while pregnant. It is entirely her own will. If anything happens to her later, please say something good for me. Then I sat upright on the armchair I had brought and looked down at Chen Wushuang. Before I entered the Marquis' mansion, I saw your play on the streets of the capital. It was really good. Keep singing. Not only did I watch, but they also brought in stools and offered refreshments to the onlookers. She was stunned and stared at me. People who have seen her perform in the past also agreed. Mrs. Shen is indeed a performer. She can speak, sing, and act. I've had the pleasure of seeing her. She's even better than the actors. The song we sang that day was about the separation of life and death. What should we sing today? It's probably a case of turning the tables and confusing right and wrong. She suddenly lost color, staggered, and was about to faint again. I smiled and clapped my hands. The court doctor stood beside me with a medicine box. Mrs. Chung is good in every way except that she has a dizziness problem. She will faint if something goes wrong. The doctor must take good care of her. Don't worry, princess. I have 81 needles in my medicine box that were passed down from my ancestors. If you don't use even half of them, I will definitely make even the fainted person open his eyes and speak.
10.
Chung Wushwang froze in place for a long time before shedding tears at the maid's signal. Sister, I took you home with good intentions. Why did you humiliate me like this? Are you going to force me to death before you stop? In that case, I will crash into death at the gate of the Duke's mansion. Having said that, she still hesitated. Even though the maid was so anxious that she was jumping up and down, she still didn't dare to take any real action. I grinned. Is there no one left in the Shen family? Send a concubine to take the lady and son back to the mansion. Are you humiliating me? Or are you looking down on the fact that there is no one in the Duke's mansion? If you were to die outside my house today, I would dress in mourning and give you a grand funeral. If you dare to die, I will recognize you as my parent. But she didn't dare. Her face turned as white as a piece of paper. The maid frowned, hating her for not doing her best at the critical moment. Everyone was even happier to see her being so pretentious and stubborn. It's just an act. It's all fake. The people who had been deceived by her before became more sober at this time. You keep saying that someone else hurt you, but you came here unscathed and disgusted people. Instead, your child is lying in bed, unable to get out of bed. A piece of filthy stuff from a pickling pit. If you don't have any tricks, how can you enter the mansion from the concubine? It's a pity for the princess. It's disgusting to face such people all day long. Chung Wushwang's grievance slowly turned into anger, and he glared at me fiercely. You're trying to kill me. I looked stern and used a provocative look to hint at her to come over. She stood up shakily and looked at the big stone lion in front of my door, as if she had made some kind of decision. The maid's face lit up with joy, but she quickly glanced at me and then lowered her face again. But before she could use her child to pull me down, Shen Rujua rushed over impatiently. What are you doing? My lord, you have come at the right time. Auntie is going to sing an opera. Do you want to listen? The next game is a good show of mutual destruction to ruin my reputation and make me feel miserable. I'm sure the Marquis has seen it clearly. Shen Rujua raised the corner of his mouth meaningfully at me, then glanced at Chung Wushwang, who was holding her tears, walked to my side, and pretended to be affectionate. What are you doing sitting outside in the dead of winter? Is Ear feeling better? Father is here to pick him up. I didn't move, so he said helplessly, why get angry over such a thing that is not worthy of being shown on the table? When I return home, I'll ask her to make amends to you. After saying that, he turned around and roared at the pale-faced Chung Wushwang. Get lost now. You should act wild in front of the Duke's mansion. You can't ruin the reputation of the princess and the young master. This time, Chung Wushwang really couldn't stand steadily and was carried out from the crowd by his maid. Only after the person involved proved his innocence personally did I bring the drama to an end. 11. My father has been too busy these days and hasn't paid attention to me. Have you ever blamed him? Shen Rujua brought the wooden sword he had carved with his own hands and won Shen Yi's heart. I don't blame my father, but father, can you please not stay in my aunt's yard all the time? Ear also wants to learn calligraphy from you.
Okay.
When I get home today, I'll prepare the pen, ink, paper, and inkstone and teach you how to write, okay? Shen Yi nodded like a chick pecking at rice. Let's go home now. I want to learn calligraphy from my father. Amid Shen Yi's excitement, Shen Rujua stood up and looked at me. Between the accidental discharge of guns, it was all a secret contest. In order to make Ear give up completely, we returned home. The price she paid was that the maidservant beside her received 30 lashes on her behalf. In order to vent Ear's anger and to appease me, Shen's mother confined Aunt Chung to her room and forced her to copy scriptures for her unborn child in the yard. I don't know whether she was venting her anger for me or protecting Chung Wushwang and the baby in her belly in disguise. For the first time, Shen Rujua didn't say anything, but he helped me confirm it. When Mr. Shen came to visit Ear, he was carrying his birdcage. Seeing that Ear was still alive, he said to his bird, "It's okay. Brother, it's okay. Let's go. Grandpa will take you to the lake." I've gotten used to this. He just turned around and reminded Aunt Yao to keep a close eye on Shen. And it's time to settle the account between me and Cheng Wushuang.
12.
On the Laba Festival, Cheng Wushuang, who had just been imprisoned for half a month, was released. When Shen saw her, he was so scared that he hid behind someone. "She will throw water on me." Cheng Wushuang's smile froze, and Shen Rujua quickly spoke up to help. Ear getting burned was just an accident. Auntie is an elder. You must not be rude to her. Shen Yi pouted his lips in grievance, looked at me, and only after getting my tacit approval and affirmation did he walk to his seat. Cheng Wushuang had a smile on his face and deliberately sneered at Ear countless times while holding the teacup. Ear was so scared that she trembled several times, and Shen Rujua saw it all. He just turned his head indifferently, ignoring it calmly. I didn't speak until the meal was served. "I'm here. What right do you, a concubine, have to sit here?" Several people looked embarrassed, and Shen Rujua's face turned cold. "What are you doing? Can't you just have a meal in peace?" "But our mansion does not have the custom of sitting at the same table with servants." That's enough." Mr. Shen was very embarrassed in front of his friends because his son favored his concubine over his wife, and he got angry for the first time. Stand still. As a slave, you should remember your status." Cheng Wushuang had a pale face and stood beside Shen Rujua shyly, but was splashed all over by Aunt Yao's bowl of hot soup. Amidst Cheng Wushuang's screams, Aunt Yao stood behind me and said in a neither humble nor arrogant manner, "Auntie, there is no need to do this every time. I am a thick-skinned slave, not as delicate as you. A little hot water will not kill me. People outside say that you are unruly and disrespectful, and that you have hurt the reputation and friendship of the Marquis and Duke's mansions. I have no right to say anything, but the madam in the palace has specifically asked about it. In order to avoid losing the reputation of the Marquis' mansion, you should behave yourself." It actually alarmed the palace, and Mr. Shen, who was very proud, put down his chopsticks. "Starting tomorrow, you will eat in your own yard. Have a meal." She didn't dare to argue, but just watched us eat with resentment, enduring the blisters on her legs. Shen Rujua wanted to help her out, but was called to the study room by Shen's father. By the time dinner was over, he still hadn't come back. Cheng Wushuang deliberately limped after me. "Don't be complacent. I will always repay you. Your child should be the most noble one. But what can I do? The Marquis said that my child is what he is most looking forward to. Are you feeling wronged? I said at the beginning that only the one who wins a man's heart can get everything from him. You finally lost to the person you despise the most." I stopped immediately, looked at her complacency, and slapped her in the face. "What do you mean by you and me? You forgot the hierarchy and have no rules. You deserve a slap in the face. Kneel down for me as your slave, forever." She panted heavily and stared at me coldly, like a venomous snake. "You are jealous of me. Jealous that I gave birth to the Marquis' favorite child. I just want to take away everything from you and make you fall into the mud." He rubbed his sore wrist and replied coldly, "I don't even like you, let alone your child. In a serious situation, you and the lump of meat in your belly can only hide like mice and don't show up. My Ear is the real prince. I was not invited to my mother's family's banquet, but you don't even have the qualifications to go. You are inferior. You think you are favored. Let's see if Shen Rujua will make an exception and take you to the palace banquet on New Year's Eve." Seeing her defeated, I walked away. But she was unwilling. "Just wait and see. He gives me everything I want." 13. I don't know what Shen Rujua could give her, but he gave Shen Yi another deep disappointment. The 1,000-year-old twin ginseng that my father had prepared long ago was placed in the warehouse as a gift to invite a teacher. Mr. Su is a man of high moral character and was the teacher of the late emperor. Shen Yi has admired him for a long time, and he will return to Beijing next year. But he is not afraid of the powerful, nor is he greedy for money, and he has a special liking for the twin Ginseng. In order to hire a teacher for Shen, his father spent a lot of effort and nearly 100,000 taels of silver to find the best and most complete Ginseng. Only Cheng Wushuang came to my yard to apologize in order to cheer up the Shen family, but was stopped outside by Aunt Yao. She pleaded for few words and then held her stomach and cried in pain. The maid claimed that her aunt was frightened and had a miscarriage. The quack doctor we hired even said that the fetus was born with congenital defects and was very weak. If it frightened the fetus, it would be difficult to give birth. If you can use twin ginseng as medicine, take care of it calmly, and ensure the mother's happiness, then there will be no problem. Shen Rujua took it without asking, and when I chased him, the ginseng had turned into powder. Do you know that this is Shen Yi's apprenticeship gift? It is a unique gift that father has been searching for a long time. He had no shame at all, and even felt very confident. Is your son's studies more important, or the life of the baby in Schwanger's belly? He's just a teacher. It doesn't matter who you invite. Why go to so much trouble? Besides, you owed Schwanger in the first place. The ginseng is just compensation. Shen Yi clenched his fists and asked Shen Rujua in a crying voice. In my father's heart, is ears matter so insignificant? There are so many ginsengs in the storehouse. Why do you want this one? Shen Rujua felt guilty when asked. Who taught you to talk to your father like that? Have you forgotten all the etiquette your father taught you? The one in my aunt's belly is your brother. How can you just watch him suffer? Shen Yi had tears as big as beans falling down her face. Father values him so much. He shouldn't have taken me back and left the mansion and title to him. Shen Rujua was furious and slapped Shen Yi to the ground. Seeing Shen Yi's cheek swollen, I was furious and slapped him twice. When he was about to fight back, I pointed the hairpin at Cheng Wushuang's stomach. If you move again, we'll collect the bodies of them and their son. I mean what I say. Perhaps it was because my eyes were too red and my hatred was too strong. Shen Rujua was so shocked that he didn't dare to move. Let her go, I won't bother with it. But I want to make a fuss. As soon as I finished speaking, I raised my hand and broke Cheng Wushuang's right hand with a hairpin. I calmed down after watching the bright red blood splatter from her palm. If you dare to touch my people and my things, you will have to pay with one hand. See how many hands you have to pay for your misdeeds. Amid Shen Rujua's roar and Cheng Wushuang's cries, I carried Shen Yi and returned to the yard without looking back. I let his tears wet my clothes, and I didn't say a word to comfort him. It is always better to see the truth early than to be doubly hurt later. Hope that shouldn't exist should die in the bud early. 14. In order to compensate Cheng Wushuang, Shen Rujua took the only 2 shops under his name and the position of the crown prince, which had not yet been decided as compensation. Cheng Wushuang turned around and exchanged the silver for cash and bought some gorgeous clothes covered in pearls and jade. Although she lost her right hand to play the pipa, she won a lot of money. So, what if he's a bastard? He's not necessarily inferior to the legitimate son. When my son becomes a marquis, everything will be mine. I lowered my eyes to look at the road and ignore her. She got excited. Didn't my sister say that concubines are not qualified to enter the palace? The marquis has asked for a favor to make me happy. At the end of the year, I will enter the palace. She was so proud of herself that the beads on her head shone brighter than the moon, but they were a little crooked, which made her look out of place. The lady in the Pearl Palace also has won. You are so ostentatious. Aren't you afraid of offending the noble? Sister, are you jealous of the priceless pearl hairpin given to me by the marquis? He deliberately spent a lot of time and effort to have it made specifically for me. Sister, don't like it? I like it very much and want to wear it every day. If the marquis is happy, I am happy too. Sister, are you unhappy? Then just accept it. I look at the injuries on my hands every day and feel the pain and suffering. Sister should also feel the pain. I shook my head at her pride. People who don't know what to do will not have a good ending in the end. When I heard the news that Shen Rujua was going to bring Cheng Wushuang into the palace, I claimed to be sick and sent a letter to my aunt and decided not to join in the fun. On New Year's Eve, I took Shen Yi, who was still in a bad mood, back to the Duke's mansion. Father and mother were so happy. The quiet duke's mansion seemed to become lively in an instant. My father is old, and the back that used to carry me is now a little hunched. But his love can still stand tall and firm. My Shani was lifted high by him, thrown over his head again and again, and caught steadily again and again. I'm tired of making noise and laughing until I'm tired of laughing. His father let him ride on his shoulders so that they could hang lanterns and collect red envelopes together. After the new year, Grandpa will take you horseback riding. My ear has amazing bones and must be a martial arts genius. Since there is no one to inherit my father's silver spear, I will give it to Ear. When you learn how to ride a horse, your grandpa will take you hunting. Fox fur in the West Mountain is the softest, and your grandma and mother love to use it to make scarves. When you grow up, Grandpa will take you to see the land beyond the Great Wall. That is the land your ancestors conquered. Shen Yi's eyes were always sparkling. He sat on his father's lap and asked him about the snow in the desert, the eagles in the northern frontier, the water in the south of the Yangtze River, and the flowers in the suburbs. At the age of 18, Shen Yi fell asleep in his father's arms. My mother held my hand, and we watched the fireworks in the palace together. Although my father is old, he can still provide a pillar of support for Aining. Don't worry, Ning. Just do whatever you want to do. It's just a child. An old man like me can't give her any love. The new year is a new beginning. There shouldn't be tears, but I still cried. 15. The next morning, people from the Shen family were waiting outside the door, begging me to return home quickly. But I insisted on finishing my breakfast, drinking my tea, and receiving the big red envelope from my parents before I went back leisurely. Shen Rujua was waiting anxiously outside the door, begging me to go into the palace to save his son and Cheng Wushuang. It turned out that the white moonlight in the palace shone on Cheng Wushuang's face, revealing a somewhat similar face and the same dazzling hairpin. Everyone in Beijing knew that Shen Rujua loved his concubine so much that he favored her over his wife, did not want a legitimate son, and defended the duke's mansion. In order to avoid the attention of concubines, Princess Lian Chaoyang claimed to be ill and did not enter the palace with the marquis. Bai Yueguang is now concubine Yun in the palace, the most favored and also the most proud. She could allow herself to be unfaithful, but she could not tolerate her childhood sweetheart falling in love with a stand-in, nor would she allow the stand-in to ruin her childhood sweetheart's reputation with such a face. Finding out the reason for the questioning, Cheng Wushuang was left behind with the same shock. The hairpin that dazzled my eyes became her original sin. He made up a random excuse that he had been offended and made the man kneel in the busy imperial garden. Concubine Yun is not me. She is a favorite concubine. A favored concubine has her own pride. She doesn't allow anyone to pick up things she doesn't want anymore. Therefore, her hairpin was broken on the spot, showing her firm hatred. When Shen Rujua went to beg for mercy with a smug look on his face, he was also punished by her for being rude and made to kneel in the imperial garden. It is said that Cheng Wushuang fainted again due to the same old trick, but Yun Guipin did not tolerate her. The person was directly detained in Chuxiu Palace. Shen Rujua was as anxious as an ant on a hot pan and went to the gate of the queen's palace to beg for help. The queen's aunt asked, "How is the princess?" and woke Shen Rujua up. The beginning of his arrogant and unbridled life was marrying me. Having offended the Duke of Protectorate and damaged his reputation, he ran into obstacles everywhere in the palace. Even the emperor, who praised him for his youth and potential, refused to see him. With his end of the road, he rushed back to the mansion. He came up to me slowly and stared at me for a long time. It took so long that the tea bowls were changed, but he still didn't speak. I was so fed up with him that I started to speak. "You want to save her and her baby. I'm not unwilling to help. If you have any requests, tell me." His voice was hoarse and his tone was low, as if he had suffered a lot. "I want Shen Yi, and I want to divorce her." His pupils were shocked, and he stammered for a long time before he replied in a trembling voice. You plan this? Just to take away the favor?" Shen Yi is the legitimate son of the Shen family. If the Shen family doesn't give him up on their own initiative, I can't take him away even if I leave behind a fortune. Cheng Wushuang has endured until today just to keep mother and child together. The people in the palace can't wait that long. Please make a decision as soon as possible. He held Cheng Wushuang's hairpin in his hand and pondered for a long time. Ear. He doesn't want you anymore. You stole it in the first place. You should give it back to me. In an instant, he was awakened as if by a loud slap in the face, leaning against the door, full of shock. You still hate me? You want to take revenge on me? At least, Aunt Ching is pregnant with another child. You chose him and gave up on him a long time ago, didn't you? I never thought about that. What does it matter? He is as resolute as I am. Even today, he refuses to go back to the mansion to pay respect to his grandparents. Instead of leaving it to me to tear my face off with you, it's better to break up gracefully and live a happy life with Cheng Wushuang. He pondered for a long time, so long that I almost lost my patience, and then he came out from the shadows. Okay, I promise. Write this as evidence. When I went to the palace to ask to see my aunt, the palace maid saw me coming and hurriedly hid the chestnut osmanthus cake. My hands hidden under my wide sleeves began to tremble in an instant, and my eyes turned red. Chestnut and osmanthus cake is aging's favorite. The second prince, Lu Jinghuai, is the cinnabar mole on my chest. He was originally surrounded by palace walls and was supposed to be an upright and self-disciplined crown prince. But in order to bring me hot chestnuts, he climbed over the wall again and again. Even if I was discovered by His Majesty, I would be locked up in the palace copying books for 3 months, but I would turn around and crawl into my yard again. Xiao Aining, chestnuts are delicious, but if you want to see someone, you always have to find an excuse. The rustling, sweet-scented osmanthus flowers fell on his shoulders like rain, covering him with a layer of golden light and also blending the fragrance into my heart. So sweet. Later, I pester my mother to teach me how to make chestnut osmanthus cake, and I carried it through layer after layer of palace gates and delivered it to him again and again. You shouldn't be the only one using the same excuse all the time when you want to see someone. He bit into my chestnut and locust flower cake, and the tips of his ears turned red. At that time, I thought, he is so shy and polite. What should I do on our wedding night? Unfortunately, fate played a trick on me, and I was never blessed enough to become his bride. My aunt touched my tear-stained face and said with tears in her eyes, "How can you be so cruel? You haven't come to see your aunt for 7 years. Brother always said you were very good. How could you let yourself become so thin?" In the past 7 years, the stunning aunt has grown white hair, wrinkles, and even a hint of gloomy look. Only those pair of bright eyes are still so similar to him. I didn't dare to enter the palace, nor did I dare to face my aunt, because I always thought of him. He lied to me. When he led his troops to war that year, he said that he would come back when the green plum blossoms in the yard bloomed the following year. But just after midsummer, the green plum tree that I had carefully taken care of withered. The next year, only a set of armor remained of him, and he was buried in the imperial mausoleum under Nanshan Mountain. My young man, the gentle and kind-hearted gentleman, is gone. When he left, he took with him Xianing, the unscrupulous man who is causing trouble all over the capital. Because a Jing is no longer following her around to apologize and clean up the mess for her. There is no a Jing who lets her be simple and just be herself, and he will take care of all the ups and downs. I put away my pride, buried my youthfulness, and became the most popular girl among others. Only on his birthday, I would drink alone facing the moon, get drunk, and wait for him to fall asleep. But after Shen Rujua entered my yard, he never came again. The wind in Shiliang must be very cold, but it is too far away to blow into my dreams. I almost forgot what it looks like. Aunt knows you've had a hard time, but now you've made it through. For Ear's sake, you have to be well. I collected my thoughts, held the warm jade that a Jing gave me around my waist, and smiled. Don't worry, Auntie. I'll be fine. It was so good that he didn't have to worry or miss anything. He entered the reincarnation early and pursued his future.
16.
Chushio Palace was extremely luxurious, and the face that was extremely similar to Cheng Wushuang was even more arrogant and ostentatious. She looks down on me because I can't even get what she doesn't want. But she was jealous of me who got the advantage, and every time her eyes fell on my face, it was like a knife. The county magistrate was not strict in his teaching. I taught him a few things on his behalf. Is the county magistrate happy? I shook my head and handed the divorce letter to her. If I can't even take care of myself, how can I take care of others? She was surprised, but felt it was natural. You lost to her. I lost to my child, never to her. In my opinion, she is not as good as you. So why do you let her ride on your head? I breathed a sigh of relief and told her that heartless men often use affection as an excuse to do despicable things. I find this kind of person disgusting and don't want him anymore, so I gave him to someone else. It's a pity for her that the person with the same face as her got a life that she couldn't have. She wondered again whether the man wanted the face or the bitch. I told her with a smile that I was moved by that face and wanted to turn the white moonlight into rice grains. But later he found that someone who is gentle and well-behaved, timid but controllable, and always looked up to him could comfort a heartless man who has not reciprocated more than you and I. She was silent for a long time, and when she figured it out, she shook her head and ordered others to bring Cheng Wushuang up. After one day of not seeing her, she was completely different. I don't like her hypocritical behavior, so I gave her a lesson. I hate it too. But the Shen family values her and the piece of meat in her belly. Concubine Yin laughed wildly, as if she had heard some funny joke. Give it back to him. Give it back to him. He deserves this. Finally, the corners of his eyes were wet, and his gaze became deep. The princess can be trusted. They will be punished by heaven and will be punished. I smiled as she watched her lonely figure leave. It is too difficult to wait for divine punishment, but everything depends on human efforts. 17. When sending Cheng Wushuang, who had completely lost her pride, back to the Marquis mansion, the Duke's mansion sent many carriages to take away all traces of my life. Shen Rujua stood at the door, the whistling wind lifting his robe. Shuang, are you okay? How is the child? He really took her to heart. However, Shen's mother rushed over in a rage, grabbed Cheng Wushuang and started beating and scolding him. You jinx, how did my mansion owe you? You brought disgrace upon us, and. She couldn't say anything about losing her golden rice bowl, so she just pushed the other person hard and wiped her tears with her handkerchief. I shouldn't have let you in. I shouldn't have. It's just a child. Other women can't have it. Why must you choose this scourge? Cheng Wushuang fell softly to the ground and finally regained a trace of consciousness, but looked directly at Shen Rujua and asked resolutely, You've always treated me just because of her? Shen Rujua's hands holding her froze in place, with an embarrassed look on his face. Now you are the only one by my side. I just need to live a good life from now on. You are the only one in my heart. Cheng Wushuang smiled and shed tears. Okay, live a good life. After all, I'm pregnant with a prince of the Marquis. Her expression was so crazy and frightening. Father Shen's opium den and tea house were all taken back by the Duke's mansion. He lost face in front of his friends and rushed home in a hurry, only to find that I was about to leave. He finally stopped being so careless and even stood up to me and said something nice. She made you unhappy. I helped you deal with her. Don't do this. She made me unhappy not only today, but only today, and let this unhappiness fall on him. Seeing that I was unmoved, he got anxious and pulled Shen Rujua to apologize to me. A husband and wife are bound by 100 days of grace. You have a child. Can't you just talk it out? Divorce is always a loss of face, and it's not worth it if one loses and two lose. Quick, comfort your wife. When you asked her to marry, you said you would never let her suffer any injustice. Go and fulfill your promise. Even though it's a divorce, it's hard to avoid people gossiping about her being an orphan and a widow. Shen Rujua clenched his teeth, feeling extremely embarrassed. That's her own fault. Father, Shuang is injured. I am in a hurry to return home. No need to say more. I also smiled calmly, walked around the family who were reluctant to leave Fugue, without looking back. The heavy rain came suddenly, let the storm and rain fall on the greedy Shen family. 18. After I left, the fortunes of the marquisate fell into decline. The few shops and savings that Shen Rujua had all fell into my pocket because he tried to please Cheng Wushuang. During these 5 years, I paid the money into the Shen family's account, and when I left, Shen Rujua used the remaining farm as compensation. Without the large amount of income, the huge mansion began to have difficulty making ends meet. Mr. Shen's canaries were flying and running, and the remaining few chirping and wanting to eat venison and drink spring water were also thrown to death in the yard by Mrs. Shen. Cheng Wushuang's belly grew bigger day by day because of the bullying by Shen's mother. However, she could not stand the blows and tortures in the backyard. After more than a month, she seemed to be drained of all her energy. Instead, the maid beside her found an opportunity and climbed onto Shen Rujua's bed. When Cheng Wushuang looked at the dense marks on Jiner's body, she collapsed. The Marquis mansion was very lively that day. Jiner is more fragile than Cheng Wushuang. Jiner is more willing to compromise than Cheng Wushuang, and Jiner is better at coaxing people than Cheng Wushuang. Amid Cheng Wushuang's aggressive pressure and Shen Rujua's silence, he hit the pillar. Blood splattered everywhere, and he fainted on the spot. But she was blessed with great fortune and survived. Grasping Shen Rujua's guilt, she decided to go to the manor to spend the rest of her life. Shen Rujua agreed. But Cheng Wushuang couldn't stand the double betrayal, so he took a pair of scissors and stabbed Jiner in the abdomen. Jiner lay in Shen Rujua's arms, touched his cheek, said goodbye with a smile, and expressed her deep affection. My lord, you don't know that when you first fell in love with my aunt, you stole Jiner's heart. How long you have loved my aunt. Jiner has loved you, my lord. Jiner is so lucky to be able to spend one night with a prince. I will die without regrets. I only ask your majesty not to forget Jiner and her humble love for me. If there is an afterlife, let me be ahead of everyone else and give you all my love and care. Shen Rujua's body was shaking. He held Jiner in his arms, and with red eyes he scolded Cheng Wushuang for being a vicious snake and said that he had misjudged her. Cheng Wushuang cried and laughed and cried again. Use me? You are not worthy. Want to be my wife? Go dreaming in hell. But she lost in the end. Jiner didn't die. Not only did she not die, she also became a concubine as she wished and was favored by Shen Rujua alone. When Cheng Wushuang's belly was 7 months old, Jiner also became pregnant. In response to Jiner's provocation, she angrily went to Jiner to seek an explanation, but was killed by a pair of scissors during the argument. Jiner trembled while holding the scissors. I didn't mean it. I didn't mean it. She's the one who wants to kill me. Shen Rujua was frightened by the death of Cheng Wushuang. He held the 2 dead bodies and covered his chest with his hands. He was in so much pain that he lost his voice, but he did not notice the sinister smile on Jiner's face. My lord, please punish me. I am a sinner. Of course you are a sinner. I brought people from the Ministry of Justice and went straight to the door to kill them. Why are you here? What are you doing? I asked with a cold smile. So, you think you've taken everything from me and kicked over my stepping stone, and you're the biggest winner, right? She turned her head away and shook her head at Shen Rujua. I don't understand what the princess is talking about. How could you not understand? Ms. Su Jinyao, who tried so hard to put me under her feet. Su Jinyao turned pale instantly. Su Jinyao, the niece of the Vice Minister of War, loves the second Prince Lu Jinghuai and is willing to be a concubine without asking for any status. But aging only has me in his heart, so he won't allow anyone else to worry about him. He immediately refused her sternly and issued a death order, not allowing her to come near. She was unwilling to give in, so she put drugs in Aging's tea and almost succeeded in climbing into the bed, but I found her and threw her into the cold lake. She hated me so much that she once hired someone to plot against me in an attempt to destroy my innocence, but I had seen through her plan long ago and retaliated against her. Although she lost more than she gained, she still touched Aging's sore spot. The matter of Minister Su forming a clique to embezzle disaster relief funds for the eldest prince was brought to court by Aging. The minister was beheaded, and the entire Su family was exiled. Before leaving, she knelt down and begged Aging, but Aging did not go to see her that day. Instead, he stood in the white snow, holding a rare green plum to cheer me up. Su Jinyao, who was holding a grudge, was thrown into the Jiafangxi, where she met Cheng Wushuang, who shared a face with Yun Guipin. So, she finally had an outlet for her hatred. And I, the main culprit, will have to endure the fate of losing my offspring, being rejected and abandoned, and becoming a divorced woman, laughed at by everyone. Everything Cheng Wushuang did was planned by her behind the scenes. Now that her goal has been achieved, she is unwilling to be Cheng Wushuang's maid, so she wants to get rid of her and monopolize all the Marquis mansion. It's been 8 years. Although you look different, the hateful look in my eyes remains the same. How could you be so naive to think that I don't even recognize you? Seeing that the truth had been revealed, Su Jinyao calmed down. Now that I have the Marquis's child, the Marquis will definitely ask for a way out for me. After all, if I don't get well, his child won't be able to survive either. He only has this one child. He must keep him whether he can or not. I smiled calmly and called the imperial physician. She calmly stretched out her hand to feel Shen Rougeois' pulse, but the imperial physician avoided her and directly grasped Shen Rougeois' wrist. As expected, Shen Rougeois' face was full of doubts, and then the imperial physician told him the story. It turned out that after Shen Rougeois was punished to kneel on New Year's Eve, concubine Yun couldn't bear to see him get hurt, so she sent someone to see him. At that time, the imperial physician already knew that his body was very weak and it would be difficult for him to conceive. Yun Guipin thought that it was Cheng Wushuang who gave him the drug, but Cheng Wushuang was diagnosed with a girl in her belly. After the Shen family was extinct, Yun Guipin said that they were punished by God. Shen Rougeois was completely pale. He looked at Su Jinyao, who was also pale, and asked, Your stomach. Of course it's not yours. I smiled and sent Su Jinyao's benefactor to Shen Rougeois. The man heard everything and was terrified. He knelt down in front of Shen Rougeois. My lord, spare my life. She seduced me. I didn't know she had such intentions. My lord, spare my life. Shen Rougeois staggered 2 steps, looked at me for a long time, then covered his chest with his hands, vomited a mouthful of blood, and fainted. Su Jinyao committed murder for money, and with both witnesses and evidence present, he was thrown into jail immediately. The spring breeze is very strong, full of pride. Who could know that the reason why Shen Rougeois lost the ability to bear children was all because of me? 19. When I married Shen Rougeois, I set 3 rules. It's just to deal with parents. We are just a nominal couple and don't interfere with each other. But on Aging's birthday that year, I was drunk again in the moonlight, and he took the opportunity to carry me into the bedroom, gave me aphrodisiac, and stripped me of my clothes. I also mistook him for Aging and spent the night with him. We became a real couple in the true sense of the word. The next day, he hugged me and promised me, pretending to be sorry. To deal with my parents, I also need a child. I promise I won't embarrass you again. I didn't say a word, but when Aunt Yao applied medicine to my bruises and cried, saying that it was Madame Shen who locked her in the kitchen where she was making sobering soup, which prevented her from coming to save me in time, I felt hatred. But Shen Rougeois used the excuse that my stomach was not moving, tied up Aunt Yao, and stuffed her into his mother's carriage to pray for me. But he broke his promise, walked into my yard openly, trapped me in the room, and forced me to bear a child. Later, my mother did not receive my greetings, so she broke into the mansion and rescued me, who looked emaciated. I was already pregnant at that time, but my mother cried with red eyes and wanted to ask Shen Rougeois for an explanation. But Madame Shen said with a fake smile, How can I not have sex after living in the mansion for a year? If the news gets out, although the princess's reputation is small, it will involve Qingfeng Mingyue in the palace. I'm afraid. She threatened me with my relationship with Aging. I swallowed my bitterness and tried to cheer my mother up. Although it's a little difficult, Aining wants to have a child. With a child, Aining is no longer lonely. My mother stopped pestering me and sent me several skilled maids on the pretext of asking them to manage the backyard for me. When Shen saw that I was pregnant, he used this as an excuse and no longer approached me easily. Just a few days later, when I went to deliver the fabric to Shen's mother, I heard her proudly say to Shen, "You won't go wrong if you listen to mother." If mother hadn't been so smart and made her lose her reputation in public, how could she be willing to marry into our mansion? I didn't marry her just for show. Now that she's pregnant, she'll be well behaved. Why do we need her concubine? A concubine can carry on the family line, but can her dowry and family property fall on us? When she gives birth to a child of our Shen family, her body, her heart, including her property and dowry, will only belong to our Shen family. If she's obedient, I'll take good care of her. If she's disobedient, I'll secretly give her a bowl of medicine to kill her and keep her child. Don't even mention her dowry. Even the Duke's mansion will have our surname Shen. Shen sat in the rocking chair, feeling contented. After all, it's not the men who suffer. Just be happy. Just one thing, I will help you fulfill your wish. You can't stop me from accompanying my confidant. Otherwise, I will write you a divorce letter and end your dream of wealth and glory. Silly child, how could your mother not know you? As long as you can hide it from her, it's up to you. All the materials that day were cut into pieces and thrown into the brazier. The firelight illuminated the hatred in my eyes. So, I will make him pay the price. I will ruin his reputation and make him exterminate his descendants. After receiving my financial support, he stopped following me and went out to find many beautiful girls. I didn't care, but I was secretly making plans until Chen Wushuang's portrait was placed on my desk. The subsequent heroic acts of saving damsels in distress, the subsequent kneeling in the snow, and the subsequent heartfelt speeches were all due to my guidance and encouragement. I want him to be ruined and lose everything because of her and them. 20. After becoming a laughingstock in the capital, Shen lost his love and became childless. He finally thought of me and Ear. He looked for an opportunity and pushed Ear and I into an alley. Come back with me. We are a family after all. We should be together. Ear stood in front of me, staring at the person in front of her with hatred. When I was young and ignorant, I thought my father was my heaven. But now that I've grown up, I know that the man who schemed against my mother is not worthy of being called my father. If you dare to hurt my mother today, I will cut off your hands and feet. Shen didn't care at all, and even pressed us mother and son. I'm your father. How dare you lay hands on me? Do you not even want a future for yourself? They say I can't have children, but I don't believe it. Come back with me, and we'll give Ear a brother or a sister. It will not only strengthen our relationship, but also dispel the rumors. Don't act so noble. Were you not very happy on the day we had sex? As he spoke, his hand reached out for my waist. Before I could get rid of the hairpin I was holding, the next moment, Xia Yi's dagger landed on his wrist. A bloody hand fell to the ground. Shen eyes were red, and he covered his wrist and screamed. I warned you, but you didn't believe me. There was nothing I could do. My father said that gratitude was amazing, but I didn't believe it at first. But he broke the fangs of the stone lion in front of the door with one shot, so I believed it. Carrying Shen disabled hand, we entered the palace. He pushed my mother and I into an alley, spoke frivolously, and even tried to do something indecent to my mother. I would have let him off easy by cutting off his hands and feet. I am willing to bear the crime of patricide, but your majesty, please ensure justice for my mother. The whole hall was in uproar, and His Majesty was furious. Although Xia Yi was confined for half a year, he copied 10 books. However, Shen was stripped of his title, and his family was beaten with sticks and driven out of the mansion. Without any more industries or shops, they had nowhere to stay. Shen hand became disabled due to lack of medical treatment, and he lived on the streets with no one recognizing him. On a dark and windy night, he was shot through the heart by an arrow and died in a dark alley. Ear's life was so long, How could he tolerate such a stain? Mrs. Shen went from being a noble lady to being a street beggar. Unwilling to give up, she sold herself to a prostitute, where she smiled and was whipped and humiliated by people who laughed at her, and even endured inhuman torture to earn the few coins she loved most. After serving a horse runner with a quirk, he died in bed, covered in blood. He was rolled up in a straw mat and thrown into the moat. Mr. Shen's family was destroyed. He lost his mind, became mad, and imitated his thrush, chirping under the tree all day long. In late autumn again, the withered green plum blossoms suddenly sprouted. Yer came into my yard with her homework. "Mother, Mr. Sue brought my senior brother to me. Please go and see him." He pulled me into the side yard. Under the golden osmanthus tree, the man stood tall in a green robe. He only heard the call, smiled, and turned around and bowed. "Greetings, princess." My heart skipped a beat, and I was so shocked that I was speechless. The rouge mole at the corner of his eye is as red as the cinnabar mole in my heart.